So I think that the breakout is a good signal, right? So we've been consolidating in price since March of this year. I think that the launch of the ETFs kind of pulled forward some demand. So you had a little
Hmm.
bit, overly high sentiment. People kind of bid it to the moon, and it takes time to kind of digest that change. And we kind of went through that. I think we would have eventually broken out either way, regardless of how the election turned out. But obviously, there's even though there are Republicans and Democrats that are on both sides of the issue, and right now in American politics, the Republican side is generally more favorable toward Bitcoin
Hmm.
than the Democratic side. There's talks about a strategic reserve,
Hmm.
explicit statements that people should be able to custody their own coins, or and maybe even have it like not be taxed.
As Bitcoin's price continues to rise, financial analyst Lyn Alden delves into the forces driving this surge and its potential for further growth in a conversation with Natalie Brunell. Alden discusses the impact of ETFs and shifting political dynamics on Bitcoin's future. She notes increasing resistance to decentralized assets, particularly in highly regulated regions like Europe. This regulatory pushback, she explains, highlights the ongoing tension between traditional financial systems and the rise of decentralized technologies, with both supporters and critics acknowledging that this conflict exposes weaknesses in legacy financial models, especially in times of economic stress. Alden also examines the U.S. fiscal situation, warning of potential risks associated with large, ongoing deficit. While she downplays the immediate threat of hyperinflation, Alden cautions that the U.S. could gradually undergo an emerging market transformation where structural deficits may destabilize the economy. She believes this shift could foster populist sentiments and increasing public frustration, emphasizing the deep connection between economic policy, financial stability, and social unrest. For more insights from Lyn Alden, be sure to check out clips from the interview.
Hi guys, hope to see you guys at Dubai Token 2049. We have exclusive 10% off the limited super early bird tickets. Click the link below. This pass will grant you access to speaking sessions, networking app, exhibition hall, daily networking drinks, and also included breakfast, lunch, and coffee breaks, all included the package. I love to see everyone there. Peace out.
So I think that the breakout is a good signal, right? So we've been consolidating in price since March of this year. I think that the launch of the ETFs kind of pulled forward some demand. So you had a little
Hmm.
bit, overly high sentiment. People kind of bid it to the moon, and it takes time to kind of digest that change. And we kind of went through that. I think we would have eventually broken out either way, regardless of how the election turned out. But obviously, there's even though there are Republicans and Democrats that are on both sides of the issue, and right now in American politics, the Republican side is generally more favorable toward Bitcoin
Hmm.
than the Democratic side. There's talks about a strategic reserve,
Hmm.
explicit statements that people should be able to custody their own coins, or and maybe even have it like not be taxed. And so I
Yeah.
generally take the under on major changes. So like, would I guess in 4 years from now, do we have a gigantic Bitcoin reserve, or is Bitcoin tax free? That'd be cool. I wouldn't
Yeah.
I wouldn't really base my investment decision on that being the case. Um, but in general, I'm not making a statement around politics, but basically in terms of this specific industry, that was generally seen by the market as the more favorable choice.
Hmm.
Um, I think that where I'm also more conservative is around privacy.
Mm.
So I think that while this election had major impacts on, for example, the SEC and broader crypto securities in general,
Hmm.
and then maybe things like Bitcoin strategic reserve and stuff, I doubt it's going to be super impactful for these problematic laws around privacy, or in some
Mm.
cases, not even
Mm.
laws, but just like regulations by entities, how they interpret the law. And for example, even going after like non-custodial privacy services and things like that. And so we talked about risks earlier in this. I still think one of the biggest risks to the network is kind of this anti-privacy push
Yeah.
that the United States government and others have. And that's pretty challenging to change in the near term. I think it's going to be a longer battle. And I think even public opinion is kind of on their side at the moment, because people still have this mindset that, like, why do you need privacy? It must mean you're up to no good, or kind of Bitcoin's only used by like money launderers and druggies, and it's kind of still the mindset that a lot of people have, and that's why I think that education is so important, and the work you're doing to keep educating about it. Um, in general, I'm pretty bullish for 2025. I think that um, liquidity is probably going to be pretty good over the next 12 months. And I generally expect Bitcoin to probably be higher 12 months from now than it
Mhm.
is now. Obviously, no guarantees, but that's kind of my base case at the current time. And I think that
Mhm.
one of my kind of macro views on the election is that nothing stops this train, which
Yeah.
is to say that there are people that are pretty convinced we're going to see a big budget reduction or something like that, and I don't really see that as likely. When we look at major areas of government spending, it's mostly actually not on kind of certain bloated government employee areas. It's actually these really big core areas, things like
Mm.
Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, defense, and interest.
Yeah.
And that kind of alone is like 100% of tax receipts.
Right.
And one of the things I found interesting is that you've had somewhat of a shift in the Republican Party over the past decade, which is that if you go back a decade, that was kind of the Paul Ryan era, which was kind of a more push toward trimming some of those areas.
Mhm.
Whereas, for example, the 2024 Republican platform officially said we don't want to touch Medicare or Social Security. We don't want to reduce it or increase the retirement age, which used to be more of a Democrat position. And so, if there are certain aspects where the current Republican Party has shifted a little bit more toward like what we see in like European conservative movements, which is that they might be a little more social conservative than there are other parties there, but they're not necessarily super fiscally conservative. There's
Mhm.
there's different parts in that kind of political spectrum that politicians and voters can fall on, and so I generally assume that deficits are probably going to continue, but I'm going to monitor bills and legislation as they come up and see how this goes.
Lyn Alden views the recent surge in Bitcoin's price as a positive sign following months of consolidation. She attributes the increased demand, in part, to the launch of exchange-traded funds and notes that market sentiment needed time to stabilize. While she believes a breakout in price was inevitable, Alden acknowledges that the Republican Party's relatively favorable stance toward Bitcoin could influence market sentiment. She also emphasizes privacy as a critical concern, pointing to regulatory actions against non-custodial privacy services. Alden predicts strong liquidity for Bitcoin in 2025, with the potential for price increases. She also highlights the ongoing U.S. fiscal deficits and evolving political positions on social spending. In addition, Alden notes Europe's significant pushback against Bitcoin, framing it as the then they fight you stage. She suggests that resistance to decentralized systems often reveals weaknesses within traditional financial structures. For more insights from Lyn Alden, check out additional clips from the interview.
I do think we're seeing it in Europe to some extent, probably at the most right now, which is that you have pushback against Bitcoin. They're
Mhm.
kind of in the then
Yeah.
they fight you stage.
Yeah.
Um, and the way that I phrased it before is if a decentralized spreadsheet threatens your system, it's not the decentralized spreadsheet that's the problem, it's your system. But
Right.
that's not how a lot of people see it when, their own paychecks and their own economies having a problem.
Mhm.
Um, Going back to the earlier idea of either a deflationary bust or a hyperinflation, I tend to fall in the slow melt up camp.
Mm.
That's kind of the nothing stops this train camp, which is
Yeah.
that um, large monetized fiscal deficits are generally going to keep continuing. They're very, very hard to reduce at this stage because it's kind of recursive.
Mhm.
Um, I generally don't see hyperinflation in any sort of near term uh, sense because we're not even at like emerging market stage yet. We're kind of like dabbling in how a lot of emerging markets function in terms of finances,
Mm.
and most of those are not in hyperinflation. There's $13 trillion worth of global dollar-denominated debt that different entities have, and that all of that is in flexible demand for dollars. So this is like a Gordian knot. Like this is a really kind of like entrenched network effect, and
Mhm.
it's very, very hard to hyperinflate the dollar. Maybe in the long arc of time.
Right.
So I'm not talking things like, if you look at 20 years or so, I don't really have an opinion. We'll get closer to that. But when I look at an investable time horizon or kind of a political time horizon of say 5 or 10 years,
Mhm.
I don't really see something like hyperinflation on the table, but I do see something like emerging marketification of U.S. finances, that we enter a phase where we're structurally running these bigger monetized deficits, and then the key risk there is that if you're on the wrong side of those deficits, you're kind of getting siphoned away, and if you're on the right side of the deficits, you're doing pretty good. And then that's how you can build up more and more populism, more and more frustration that people have, and they know something's wrong, but they're not quite sure, what the nuance of that problem is. And that's kind of the thing that I get concerned about.
Bitcoin has surged past the $93,000 mark, driven by what some analysts are calling a Trump pump following President-elect Trump's announcement of plans to relax cryptocurrency regulations. This sharp increase, which doubles the year's low of $38,500, reflects renewed optimism among traders who are betting on a more pro-crypto administration. Trump's vision to establish the US as a crypto capital and build a national Bitcoin reserve has sent shockwaves through the market, with expectations of a major transformation in the regulatory landscape. Lyn Alden has pointed out that these developments offer important insights into how Trump's policies could reshape the crypto market and the global financial system. The easing of regulations may encourage more capital to flow into crypto as investors seek alternatives to traditional finance, which is struggling under large fiscal deficits and increased regulatory scrutiny. Alden highlights the growing friction between legacy financial systems and digital currencies like Bitcoin, which reveals structural vulnerabilities in traditional finance as more investors turn to decentralized assets in search of stability. With Trump's proposed deregulation and increased institutional interest in crypto ETFs, the potential for Bitcoin's mainstream adoption and a reshaped global financial system is more promising than ever. What do you think is driving this surge? Is it the growing push for privacy and decentralization, or is it all about winning over regulators to sustain this momentum? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. For more Daily Dose Crypto News, check out these 2 awesome videos on your screen. Click now and we will see you on the next video.